There are short stories and tall tales hidden inside the artifacts that sit in museums. Questions about a single item can lead to a grand tour through Michigan's past. Take a tour with us through Michigan museums, discovering the stories of simple items, a chance to understand our collective heritage. Today on Heritage, we take a look inside the Clarkston Heritage Museum. The museum, held inside the Independence District Library in Clarkston, includes wonderful artifacts and photos of Clarkston's history. A rotating set of exhibits showcases standout pieces, and today we focus on one of those, the broadside.
In 2009, walked into the office and there was a package waiting for me, a very small package. And it was from Colorado, and I wasn't expecting anything from Colorado. So when I opened it, there was a very small folded up piece of paper, maybe the size of an 8x10. And as I started to unfold it, it was getting larger and larger and larger. And I remember I kept thinking to myself, well, I just hope this is a really cool thing, but I just really hope it has something to do with Clarkston. To my complete surprise, when I had it fully open, and it's about 2.5 by 6 foot long, it was a broadside. And a broadside is something that was essentially a form of advertising. It was to be slapped up on the side of a barn or on the side of a building or in a window of a shop. And the point was to advertise something quickly and cheaply and to get that information out to the public. Well, we'd never seen a broadside that had anything to do with Clarkston, and this one was all about Clarkston. It takes place in 1873, and it's all about the celebration for the 4th of July in Clarkston. It was an amazing piece and was really, really special. Although it was in exceptionally good shape, given that it was very tissue paper thin paper, it still had a lot of folds in it and was from 1873, so there were some age spots. So we sent it down to Rivers Conservation in Detroit. That was a decision that the Historical Society Board made to spend the money, have it properly conserved, because this is something that really needs to be kept for future generations.
When Clarkston Heritage Museum first brought me their broadside, it was all folded up in an 8x10 envelope. It was kind of hard to tell what they had. So the problems with it were folds that had turned into creases and in some areas into tears. It was covered with the dust of the ages, specifically soot from puffbacks from the old type of heating systems, coal burning, and just the problems of age with paper from that era. It's in much better shape than something that would have been put up as a broadside would have been in that time period. It didn't have any glue on it. It wasn't painted over. It wasn't exposed to weathering. It wasn't put on the side of a building or anything like that. This had been preserved, folded up all of those years. So we're really very lucky to see this nearly pristine version of a broadside. So what I did to treat it was we cleaned it front and back with ground eraser crumbs. Then we washed it overall and mended the tears with Japanese tissue and wheat starch paste. When paper turns brown and gets very brittle, the chemical reaction that's going on is autocatalytic. And that means that if we leave the byproducts in the paper, it makes the degradation go at a faster rate. So when we wash these out with the aqueous treatment, the aqueous cleaning, we're kind of resetting the clock. We're removing those degradation products. So the paper is lighter and it's more flexible and it will have a longer life now.
Once the paper was conserved, the next step was to finalize encasing it. what we did is we decided to have it museum mounted so that it can never be folded or rolled or any of that. It's in good shape and it should last another 100 years.
Looks like there's a poster about the July 4th celebration in the window at Hammond's. Let's take a look. The 97th anniversary of our glorious national birthday, to be held at Clarkston, July 4th, 1873, to which a cordial and fraternal invitation is extended to the citizens of Independence and surrounding towns to join with us on that day and celebrate with one united feeling as patriots and lovers of our country.
The time when this broadside was displayed is a time in American history where there's a number of things going on that build and create this moment. In the South, we have a resurgent South rejecting Reconstruction. We have a lot of political corruption. A lot of people believe that there's a tremendous amount of moral laxity. There is a tremendous amount of labor strife. And maybe most important, the nation begins to slide into a panic, or what we would now call a depression, in 1873. And at this point in time, patriotic celebrations are used as an attempt to try and unite people and to try to create a common feeling of patriotism in this very troubled time. This particular broadside attempts to do exactly that. This celebration in Clarkston for America's 97th birthday is full of all of these kind of common celebratory patriotic moments. If you look at the top of this broadside, you see this language directly, an attempt to create one united feeling as patriots and lovers of the country. And this was a very common theme. It is in 1873 that the land for the construction of the Centennial at Fairmount Park is dedicated. And so America is very conscious of this moment. And we see a tremendous amount of this all throughout the country. And here in Clarkston, this broadside is a great example of that.
It has dignitaries from all around the area. Because a lot of the dignitaries came from Holly and Brandon and White Lake and Oxford and Davisburg, this was a celebration that was held at individual communities, and it rotated. No one little town could put on a great big huge celebration, but by combining efforts, they were able to really celebrate properly.
A national salute at sunrise. 49 young ladies in appropriate costume will represent the whole of our great constellation of states and territories. The juvenile department of our community will be represented by a full procession of our Union School under the guidance and care of their preceptors. The procession will form at 10 a.m. at the intersection of Church and Maple Streets, under the direction of the Marshal and his assistants, headed by the Clarkston Silver Cornet Band, who has kindly consented to be present that day, and will march up Main Street, thence west to Holcomb's Shady Grove, which will be fitted up with a spacious stand and amply seated for the accommodation of the audience.
These type of celebrations that is represented by this broadside contain a tremendous amount of what I would call street theater. There's bands and parades and gatherings, and here we see a band and a procession and balloons. This was very common and very much part of these patriotic celebrations.
It starts with a 100-gun salute at sunrise and goes all the way through a processional and a band and a basket picnic.
Other things that jump out from this broadside are the use of women as virtuous political ornaments. Often in these celebrations, women were used to promote morality, virtue, and especially in a time of tremendous political corruption and political upheaval, women were used as kind of a staging device to give credibility to not only politicians and political movements, but also patriotic celebrations. And here on this broadside, we see the use of 49 young ladies to represent the states and territories.
The following order of exercises will be observed: a singing of the full choir, prayer by Reverend N.D. Bancroft, music by the band, reading of the Declaration of Independence, glee from the Glee Club, an oration, music by the Marshall Band, America, sung by the full choir and audience, and a benediction by the Reverend G.W. Owen, after which there will be a basket picnic.
Some kind of acrobats on Main Street, a hot air balloon ascension, which we think is amazing and we've never seen a picture of. Finally, fireworks and then a dance at the Demarest Inn, which was on Main Street at the time.
At 3 o'clock, a grand cavalcade of comicalities will perform their evolutions in Main Street, and the whole will conclude with a balloon ascension and a grand display of fireworks in the evening. There will be a grand dance at night at the Demarest House, where all who like to trip the light fantastic toe will be accommodated.
When we started to really do some research, there's a lot of names in here that jump out at us, and you could talk for hours about all the different families that are involved in this. One of the ones that really has an interesting story for us is the fact that it says Reader Samuel W. Smith. It turned out it was Mr. Smith's relatives who donated the piece, and they hadn't actually even really made the connection as to why they had it until we started doing some research. Samuel was the son of N.B. Smith, who owned a drugstore here in town right at the corner of Washington and Main Street, where there is now a Masonic temple. And Samuel was only 21 years old when he was asked to be the reader at this celebration. So we did a little more research on Samuel, which turned out to be really easy because he led quite an interesting life. By 1878, so only 5 years later, he becomes a lawyer. So he's a lawyer for a short time, and by 1880, he's elected as the Oakland County prosecutor, and by 1884, he's a state senator. So clearly he got a great start here, but the fact that he was a reader meant that he was obviously an intelligent young man and was capable of going on to do great things. The story gets really interesting for us because here at the museum we very often find that things come from different corners of the country and come together almost like they're coming home. And so with this, it was so exciting to get this, and we've had it on display, and that was in 2009. Well, then fast forward to 2016, and there was a local estate sale in town, and part of the directive for the Clarkston Heritage Museum is to always be adding to our collection whenever we can. And so we always check out local estate sales. And we had heard that when the people had moved into this house, there were some things left in the house. And so we contacted them, and one of the things that we knew they had was a portrait. Supposedly there was a portrait of a man left in the attic when they bought the house and had been there ever since. So when we knew that they were going to be selling some of the things from the estate, we contacted them, and they were gracious enough to let us come in and purchase the portrait. At the time, we didn't know who he was. Once we purchased it, got it back to the museum, did a little research on it, which again didn't take much effort. Turned out the portrait is of Samuel Smith. So you have this long span of time frame where we get this piece from somebody in Colorado Springs who has absolutely no connection to the family and the house and Main Street. And then from Main Street, we get not only a oil on canvas portrait, but also an ink sketch of Samuel Smith. Things just have a way of finding their way home. So it's really interesting when those stories come together.
Items like the broadside have found their home in the wonderful Clarkston Heritage Museum. To find out more about the museum, you can go to clarkstonhistorical.org. You can also visit the museum during regular Independence District Library hours. Thanks for watching Heritage. We'll see you next time.